How could I have forgotten this? This is important for any F1 YouTuber. I haven't made my bold predictions yet. You know, just that means you can point at me and laugh, or completely roast me in the comments. Take your pick. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the ones I made last year, so we will cover those first. So if you want to just skip ahead to the ones I've made for this year, go and check out this timestamp right here. First off, I said McLaren would win a race. Well, wouldn't you look at that? They won 6 of them, so tick. Williams will have 2 top 5 finishes. Oh, okay, yeah, that was a misstep. The best they achieved was, I think, 7th a couple of times. Then a big one I was really proud of, Max would have a mechanical DNF, which he got in Melbourne, even though that did cause some controversy with brake wires, etc. Then I said Alonso would get a pole position, and no, he didn't. The best he got was 3rd place in China, and it was all downhill from there. Then I said Gasly would beat Ocon again, but really that shouldn't have come as a surprise. It wasn't really as bold as I thought it would have been. Then I predicted Liam Lawson would race again in 2024, and wouldn't you know it, he did, replacing Daniel Ricciardo. Then I predicted Yuki would equal his best ever result of P4 in 2024, and well, no, the closest he got was, like, Williams P7. Then I said that Leclerc would win a race from pole, and wouldn't you know it, he did, at his home race to boot. But then it all comes crashing down, me predicting that Logan Sargent would score twice in that season, and no, he didn't even come close. Then, okay, here's a laugh. Lance Stroll would get a podium. No. And then Daniel Ricciardo. No, I don't mean to laugh at that one, but yeah, that wasn't even close either. But then I'm really proud about this one. I predicted that Lewis Hamilton would win a race, but not before the Canadian Grand Prix. Wouldn't you know it? Not only was I right, but he then went on to succeed twice. Then I predicted Haas wouldn't be last, and sure enough they weren't. Then I said Piastri would win a race, but I don't count that really because I qualified that with a sprint race only. He won 2 Grand Prix. And then I predicted that a team boss would be fired, and not long after I made that prediction, Gunther Steiner was unceremoniously dropped from Haas. Overall, not bad. 9 out of 15 were correct. I thank you very much for your patience. Here are my predictions for 2025. And maybe subscribe to the channel to see whether or not I am wrong or right over the course of the year. My first prediction is that Kimi Antonelli will beat Liam Lawson in the championship standings. My justification for this particular prediction is mainly down to the fact that the level of preparation that Kimi Antonelli has had with Mercedes, it would be incredibly surprising that he wouldn't convert that into some fairly decent results. And yes, of course, I know you're going to be hurling the Monza FP1 crash at me, but even Toto took that on the chin and was saying, wouldn't you look at it? It doesn't really matter about the crash. Look at him, he was really ballsy before it. It was like water off a duck's back for Wolff. And then eventually, when he did Mexico FP1 practice, he then got a fairly decent result. I think he was the fastest of the rookies, even quicker than Franco was after a few races in the Williams car. So I do think he has got some potential here. And not to mention, in that first test session, he was the fastest, and I know testing times don't matter, but it was a clear sign that Antonelli was settling himself in quite nicely. But I think Kimi will do better simply for the fact that he has been given the red carpet over at Mercedes. I've talked about this a couple of times on the channel before, but that level of appreciation and the feeling of being wanted, including having Bono as your race engineer, that's a pretty huge deal. Whereas with Liam, it's a little bit more guarded. You're not quite sure. There are a lot of expectations toward him, and yet also not that many expectations. It's kind of confusing. Helmut Marko has basically said, just get in the car, don't touch anything, and just support Max. That's all you got to do. And don't worry about technical development. Whereas I'm pretty sure that Liam will want to thrive and develop the car, get on well with Max. It's a little bit confusing. You're not quite sure where he stands there, unlike with Antonelli over at Mercedes. And I feel that will translate into proper results, which will mean that in the standings, Kimi will just about squeak out Liam Lawson. It will be close. There will be podiums to be had, maybe even a cheeky win if the tides are right and Kimi clicks with a particular track and the upgrades, because the W16 is looking pretty handy, and I will talk about that in a subsequent prediction in a moment, but this is what I'm going to be starting off with. And this next one, which proved to be quite controversial when I pitched it to Matt from the P1 podcast, Esteban Ocon will secure Haas's first podium. Now, I know you're going to be looking at day 1 testing times and just go, are you serious? Haas were dead last and they were 20 kilometers an hour slower down the straights. Well, I personally believe they were doing their own thing, and they didn't look so silly when for a brief moment in day 2 of testing, it was raining, and no one had any inters or wets to hand bar Aston Martin, and then Esteban got sent out on some inters for some little bit of extra testing data. So, honestly, Haas, respect. But my main argument here is that Esteban Ocon has arrived at a team that desperately wanted him and respect and appreciate him for the driver that he is, after what's become incredibly clear from Esteban's own mouth and from what we've seen in recent weeks. Alpine have got their own mission to hand, that they want instant success, that they're not prepared to listen to the requests of the driver, because even Pierre Gasly is getting a little bit shaky as to the immediacy of what the team wants, instead of looking for 2026 and beyond. So maybe Esteban got the last laugh. They will be a fairly good contender for P5 in the Constructors, and I feel like a podium is perfectly reasonable, considering that Alpine got a double podium, albeit through some freakish circumstances in Brazil, but they held their own amongst all of the other competition, and if the collaboration with Toyota Gazoo Racing continues to intensify, and then Ferrari starts to really up themselves with their power unit, because, let's remember, Haas are customers of them, effectively the B team now since Sauber's on the way out, I feel like a podium is perfectly reasonable for the Frenchman, and he will be a much happier bunny because of it. And this will be a huge achievement for Haas as well, especially with Cadillac coming in next year. Having an American team, yes, they are American technically, that will be something that will certainly get the American fans buzzing, and maybe generate a little bit of hype before the All-American General Motors team arrives. This next one, it really pains me to say this, but Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris will have on-track contact twice during the season. Because despite the best interests of McLaren to have absolute team harmony and a team-first mentality, the fact of the matter is that this McLaren, the MCL39, so far is looking very planted and very, very competitive. As in, it's a continuation of what they've done throughout 2024. And maybe for the first time in quite a few years, actually, they'll be starting the season somewhat competitively with a car that isn't slow off the mark, because even 2024 was relatively slow in comparison to Red Bull and Ferrari. And with two young drivers who are looking pretty feisty, there will be moments when maybe the conversations that they have with Andrea Stella and Zach Brown before they go racing might just slip their mind. That maybe the absolute clean and harmonious racing we saw in Monza when Oscar took Lando, that might not be as clean. We might have moments when they do touch wheels, or they bang wings. We're not going to be expecting a Nico Lewis thing in 2016. I don't think it will go that far. There will be moments, though, on the radio, you'll just go, he turned into me, or he hit me. Have I got damage? Check the wing or check the floor or something like that. If Oscar and Lando are in a car that can contest for the championship, and both of them want it, and come on, they're not even in their late 20s yet. There is that young fire that is burning within them, and they have a point to prove, especially Oscar. I do feel like it will happen, no matter what the team says, in going softly, softly, and all of the hugs and kisses that Andrea Stella wants to give them. I know, it really, really pains me as a McLaren fan, but it's inevitable. They will have such a strong car, and they are very, very eager young bunnies. Then my next prediction will be Williams will grab a surprise podium on merit. Now you might be thinking, oh, come on, are you buying into the hype from testing? Well, yes, I kinda am, because already they are 2.5 seconds faster than they were this time last year in pre-season testing, and nothing has gone wrong. Carlos is banking in the laps, he's doing race simulations, they're just getting on with the business like every other team. And for Williams, that is a huge achievement in all of the stuff they've managed to do over the course of 2024. James Vowles' old adage of saying, we gotta break everything before we can start to fix stuff, this could then secure itself with maybe a cheeky podium at the Canadian Grand Prix, I'm predicting, given the fact that the last couple of Canadian Grand Prix have yielded some fairly successful results. Maybe even Baku. That was a surprise double points finish for the team. And given how Carlos has just settled himself in rather nicely, and according to himself has said it's going to take him about 6 months to fully get up to a 100% pace, this is what we're seeing from him already. Can you imagine what he might be like come the Azerbaijan Grand Prix or other tracks where Williams have been competitive before? It could happen, especially if we get moments where, indeed, Piastri and Norris take each other out, the two Ferraris have a bit of a squabble, or unreliability rears its ugly head as all of the cars are getting more and more extreme. Williams might seek to benefit from it since, well, they're not going to get ahead of themselves for this season. As they've said, 2026 is what this going to be like, but you never know. Alex could then get a shout for a podium for the first time since, well, 2020. My next prediction is that Arvid Lindblad, who is currently racing in F2, will be promoted to Racing Bulls this year. You might be thinking it's Isaac Hadjar, but you know what? I'm going to not say. Wait, Law, are you saying that Yuki Tsunoda could be replaced? I mean, who's to say? I don't know what Red Bull's doing right now. They're preparing themselves for their main relationship with Ford and the Red Bull Powertrains division for next year. There might be a moment where Christian Horner just goes, nah, you know what? Stuff it, Honda. Oh, forget it, Yuki. You're not pulling your weight. We expected you to lead the team. We're going to give Arvid a go. Because, let's be real, Christian really likes Arvid, and I'm pretty sure he would want to compare him to Helmut Marko's favourite at the moment, Isaac Hadjar, because Liam Lawson's already installed at Red Bull Racing. Yes, I know, that's incredibly bold, and it's incredibly galling especially, since I really rate Yuki. I really do. But given the fact that he's absolutely confused and befuddled and really left wondering what his future is going to be in Formula One, this would not surprise me. I am really bamboozled with what Red Bull's trying to be this year. They're not really going with the pantomime villain angle as much anymore. They're quietly confident about the RB21, and the V-Carbo 2 looks fairly planted. The livery is the best on the grid, quite frankly. I love the design and the fact they actually have a design language that isn't being borrowed from a throwback. If Isaac Hadjar completely falls off, and he's like half a second, maybe even 2 seconds slower than Yuki, they're going to have to take action. Arvid already has the amount of super license points that he requires to be in Formula 1. He will certainly be in an FP1 session, either in an RB21 or a V-Carbo 2. There will be comparisons made. This might not be happening until after the summer break, but I think it will happen this year instead of next year, where it definitely will happen, Arvid coming up to the second team. Then, this is something I've been parroting on for months and months and months, but I am locking in here. Alpine will announce their exit from Formula 1 and rebadge Team Enston as High-Tech Grand Prix. Now, if you are a regular to the channel, then you will be fully aware that I am seeing more and more evidence as to the changing identity of Alpine into High-Tech GP. I mean, the most obvious one is the fact, well, they're dropping Renault power units in favour of Mercedes, and High-Tech does have a history with the likes of Mercedes power back in the day. Oliver Oakes is the team principal. He was the founder of this latest iteration of High-Tech GP, and it's just really standing to reason that the identity of Alpine as being very French is slowly dwindling. If you took away all of the Alpine stickers on the A525 and all of the bump that comes with it, you are not really seeing much Frenchness or identity from Renault's sporty mark that you see in their WEC division. They'll just change the Alpine blue to silver. Then we'll get silver, red, pink maybe, or silver, black, pink. That in itself would be really cool, but it's not Alpine anymore. I am locking this one in. I definitely think this will happen, and I will continue to talk about this until they just say, no, we are going to be Alpine for 2026. But I'm watching you, Flavio. I'm watching you, Oliver. My next bold prediction will be Mercedes finishing ahead of Red Bull in the constructors. It's going to be extremely tight amongst the top 4 teams. There could be maybe a 30-40 point spread amongst the top 4. One bad weekend could see you tumbling down from fighting for the top spot to then maybe at the bottom of it all. I think Mercedes might just squeak out Red Bull for 3rd place, especially if Liam Lawson and Max Verstappen have a car that trails off, or maybe Red Bull prioritizes the following season sometime in the midpoint where it's clear they're not going to be fighting for the outright Drivers' Championship. However, they're going to have an internal pressure, because who's to say whether or not the position in the championship clause is still in Max's contract, where if he finishes lower than 3rd in the title race, he does have the right to cut off the contract and go and seek employment elsewhere. Mercedes right now look really confident. This is the first time I've seen them this chirpy in preseason testing in the entire ground effect era. I mean, just look at George knocking around in his Spaceman Adidas hoodie, which I actually unironically like. I don't know why, but I just do. There's just something about George's aura that feels really casual at the moment, that maybe he's just going, blimey, after all this time, this car's feeling as good as it was in Sakira 2020, so I finally made it. You've got to live up to expectations, because remember, your contract is up at the end of the year. So you will be wanting to impress. This next one I think you might find interesting. Lance Stroll will lose his cool on camera. You might be a little bit confused as to why I've included this in my top 15 bold predictions. Well, come on, the clue is in the name. I want it to be bold and controversial and spark some curiosity. Everyone's wondering about what's going to be going on with Lance Stroll's future with the team. I feel like one thing that could happen, especially if Aston Martin kick on and are relatively competitive as to what they were last year, as in they can actually be seen as realistically scoring points in the regular, is that Lance will have to live up to expectations because, quite frankly, last year he was nowhere. Had it not been for Fernando putting in the results early in the season, Aston Martin may have been trying to fend off 8th place in the Constructors because they fell off hard in 2024. But maybe the pressure, especially when the brain trust of Aston Martin really kick into high gear with Andy Cowell, Enrico Cardile, Adrian Newey, they've been brought in to win with Aston Martin, as well as Honda, Aramco. There's so much going on in the background that we don't know. Maybe this might illustrate itself in some kind of moment where Lance Stroll has an absolute meltdown on camera. He crashes out hard. He gets testy with a reporter. Or we spot him on camera having a blazing argument with the team principal. Or if Adrian Newey's knocking around and we see a moment where Lance Stroll really looks like he's under a cloud. The A players will be looking at Lance Stroll and saying, how are we expected to win with this kid? He's not doing what we expect. Fernando's giving us everything. Lance isn't. Something needs to happen. Either Stroll steps up or he goes. Because as the late Steve Jobs said, A players like to work with other A players. If you get B, C, D players who are just coasting, that's not going to watch for very long. If it happens, I'm just like, called it. This next one, you might think is a little bit ahead of myself and buying into the hype a little, kind of like with Williams. Lewis Hamilton will win at least 4 Grand Prix in 2025, maybe being an early challenger for the title. Now you might be thinking, oh, come off it, Lord, you're buying into the hype. You're showing your true colours, your British bias, you're a Lewis Hamilton gusher. No, what I am is somebody who respects the achievements of Lewis Hamilton and can recognise a happy Lewis when I see one. And as a McLaren fan, I am loving the fact that Ferrari is getting back on its feet as an historic rival to Bruce McLaren's Woking-based team. And yes, I know he was a New Zealander, but they are registered in the UK. The point is, though, is that Lewis has been seen smiling like a Cheshire cat way more often in just the last few weeks than he has been in the last few years over at Mercedes. Everything's coming up roses and he's feeling energized, and that's the point. Lewis has been demoralized for so long. Now he's got a car that is seemingly coming toward him. He's taking it slowly and steadily, of course, and that's perfectly reasonable to do so. But if it really clicks and Ferrari's got something good to go up against McLaren and Red Bull and maybe Mercedes as well, Lewis could be stood to get several podiums, maybe even a few wins. Maybe at the beginning of the season, it really depends on how well the other competitors are doing. If there's one clear favourite and all of the others have to back off, then so be it. They will fall off, and potential wins could be easily eluding him and Charles. But I do feel like 2025 will be a year where he gets on top of these regulations. Then this next one may be a little bit obscure for some of you more recent fans, but Max Verstappen will finish a race not in the points. Let me illustrate the significance of this prediction, is that Max Verstappen, the last time he was a classified finisher on a Grand Prix and not scored a single point, was back in Spa 2016, in his first year with Red Bull Racing. Ever since then, he has either retired from the race, so he wasn't classified, or he finished in the points. 9 years! That is unheard of. That is absolutely crazy. And I think it could happen this year if Red Bull do fall off, or if some of the midfield pack, or maybe outcompete some of the front-running teams at certain tracks where they might actually have an advantage. That could easily happen, more so than the last few years where Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, they've been clearly taking up most of the points positions. So I'm probably going to be putting myself out there and say that Max will finish P11 or something like that, and having completed an entire race distance. This next one I think is slowly burbling in the background, but I reckon that Sauber will drop their stake sponsorship deal mid-season. The things that have been going on revolving around the kick-stake brands, some of their brand ambassadors being dragged through the dirt on social media and in the news, and of course the latest controversy, which saw Stake not being allowed to be promoted or advertised in the UK, there is clearly more and more resistance towards this particular brand. And Audi may be looking at this and just going, you know what, forget that. They own the Sauber Group now, 100%. Mattia Binotto is instructed by Audi to do his thing. And if this comes at the cost of dropping a key sponsor and maybe risk losing tens of millions of dollars because of it, fine. So be it, because this team needs to build up its credibility. Even the livery looks like they took a look at last year's livery and go, like, with a hangover, oh, what was I thinking? Oh, that was so cringe, oh my goodness. Not to mention the fact that the renders really disappointed when we saw it on track, because the gradients looked minimal, and in some cases, they looked like there was just a clear cut from green to black, like there was not much effort put into this transition at all. You know the team is just wanting to just be done with this sponsorship deal, and if there is any opportunity to ditch it, akin to Haas ditching the likes of Uralkali, then they'll take it. Because Audi, they'll be coming in, they're ramping things up, they're collaborating Audi with Sky Sports in various podcasts and whatnot. They're getting themselves ready to be seen within Formula One. And if it involves getting rid of that green and replacing it maybe with Audi red and grey, then so be it. I know that Audi has said that they didn't want to bring themselves up slowly, but just come in 2026 right from the get-go. But I think they might just reach a point where just they'll go, don't care, we just need to be done with this, because this is ruining our credibility. Because come on, 2024, a lot of the stuff that Valtteri and Zhou had to do, it was absolutely cringy. And then this next one, it really pains me to say this too, Jack Doohan will be dropped before Miami, despite performing well. Now, I know that Australia is my third biggest demographic, and you might be absolutely insulted hearing this coming from me. I don't want this to happen. I want Jack to have his fair crack at the whip, and I am really respecting his gusto and his resistance and charisma by just batting away the criticism like a champion. But I feel like that maybe he is fighting a losing battle, but at least he's going down swinging. Pierre Gasly's not really helping him. He's trying to remain out of this, Gasly. He's already worrying about his own future with Alpine, but whether or not they're looking at instant success or long-term goals, he's not quite sure, the Frenchman. But as for the Australian, I just feel like no matter what happens, he cannot fight the tsunami that's coming his way and the whims and desires of the incoming Argentinian sponsors. Flavio will find some kind of excuse to get rid of Jack, maybe saying that everything's so tight in the midfield, they need every opportunity they can get. And Colapinto, right there, he's the flavour of the month at the moment, and Alpine needs some good news headlines behind them, because they've been dragged through the dirt for the last few months, especially with the whole Bruno Faman thing. They're looking to recover their PR. Oliver Oakes is doing a decent job by being a really nice guy, but I think they need more than that, and they're going to have to counter the backlash from getting rid of Doohan with the applause from various markets of bringing Colapinto back in to resume his story. Now, let me just make this clear for anyone in the comments. I am not a Franco hater. I value him, I rate him, but I want Jack to have a fair go. Next up, I reckon the Aston Martin Verstappen rumours will only continue to intensify with more vocal insider commentary, because the latest tidbit from Helmut Marko, saying quite frankly the quiet part out loud, is that oh, Aston Martin, oh, they're trying to bait my boy with that GT3 contract of Verstappen.com Racing, because they're going to be fielding Aston Martin GT3 cars for, I think it's the GT World Challenge Europe series or something like that. I may have gotten the words wrong, but a GT series, and it's Verstappen's team with Aston Martin cars, and that there was some kind of contract, and even though it's only for GT cars, and Max has said so, it is some kind of internal connection to Papa Stroll. It's important for Aston Martin to give Max the best things possible, so that means he can then warm to the idea that, oh, these Aston Martin guys are pretty good and they're very fast. Maybe the F1 team's good as well, because Adrian's there. And maybe if Adrian Newey, once we start to see him in Aston Martin colours with his notebook, maybe he might start to be a little bit more punchy, more vocal in headlines, since we're not quite sure, not even Alonso and Papa Stroll, as to the influence of this guy. Andy Cowell, the team principal, saying, we should allow him to fly. Do not restrict him. Do not stifle him. Let him be free, a free spirit, as Alonso said. And now, supposedly, Aston Martin said they managed to extract one of the important tools from Adrian's time at Red Bull. They managed to find his old pencils around the back of the bins in Milton Keynes, I see. Very smooth move. Then I predict that Andreas Stella and Zach Brown will exchange harsh words publicly. You call yourself a McLaren fan, Law? Shame! Shame on you! How dare you see discord with supposedly your favourite team? Oh, you may as well just give it up and say you're a Ferrari fan. No, hang on. Hear me out. I have good reason for this, because I'm a McLaren fan. I pay attention to the headlines, and one thing I paid attention to that was sort of glossed over for some publications, that both men have a favourite driver, and it's not the same. Andrea has gone on record saying that his favourite is Oscar, and Zach, obviously, his favourite is Lando. And if there is a moment where, if you go back to my earlier prediction, that those two men clash on track, what are they going to do? Who do they back? Who do they support? Does Andrea favour Oscar whereas Zach favours Lando? Is that going to lead to an intense argument where they're having some means to try and find some internal discussions or compromise? I don't know. But it will get to a moment where we start to see conflicting statements from both men. The CEO of the McLaren Racing Group and then the team principal of the McLaren Formula One team, who's been locked in for a multi-year contract. So he's got the confidence to say, well, I'm going to be around for a very long time and I'm going to stamp down my authority. I will not tolerate this certain action. And come on, Formula One has seen throughout its history tensions between the upper management of all teams, including McLaren. Even though they're trying their best not to emulate the past will catch up with them. And then my final prediction, which may seem tame to you, Liam Lawson will earn a multi-year contract extension with Red Bull this year. Now this goes hand in hand with my earlier sentiments that Red Bull might be looking to change its public perception, maybe have a cultural reset. And that might be realizing that, hey, maybe we should try and foster and invest in Liam a little bit more and just not drop him this year. So even though many people are being quite cynical and just going, oh, come on, Liam will be dropped this year. And even I have said that maybe this was the year where Red Bull called Liam Lawson's management team's bluff, saying, oh, if you don't give him a position within Red Bull by 2025, we can go and look elsewhere. And now Red Bull are going, well, okay, prove it. Well, I think Liam might prove it, because have you seen him? It looks like he's aged a few years, but in a good way. He looks far more mature than he was just 6 months ago. It's crazy. And I'm really, really sad that Formula One is not leaning into the Lightning McQueen shtick. I think there was a poster they had, and they didn't include Ka-chow! Surely, at one of the American races, Formula One gets Owen Wilson to have a little one-on-one chat with Liam. Or maybe why not get Larry the Cable Guy and say, who got counted? Liam Lawson's one of the freshest people of radio screens. Woo! Or maybe, in the next Cars movie, because come on, there will be one eventually, Liam Lawson makes a cameo as a Ford Mustang Mach-E. You can get Max in as well. You can have 2 Ford Mustang Mach-E's. And there you have it, my 15 bold predictions for the year. If you want to find out whether or not I'm wrong by the end of this season, be sure to subscribe to call me out immediately if I am wrong. And if you would like to hear me yap about something else, then I predict that you might like this video here, which you can go and watch right now.